The day Romy Calderon discovered her father's secret journal started like any other, but by the time the sun set, her life would feel unrecognizable. Have you ever found something so shocking it makes you question everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? Something hidden in plain sight, yet so deeply private that opening it felt like stepping into a forbidden world? That is exactly what happened to Romy, and what she reveals now is more terrifying than anyone could imagine. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Romy returned to her family's sprawling estate in Crescent Hills, a town that prided itself on its manicured lawns and immaculate facades. The Calderons were considered the perfect family, successful, wealthy, admired. Her father, Lucien Calderon, was a celebrated filmmaker known for his blockbuster dramas and philanthropic appearances. His mother, Marissa, a former Broadway actress, exuded grace and warmth. From the outside, their lives seemed flawless. But Romy always sensed there was more beneath the surface, something unspoken that even family whispers couldn't fully articulate. On that fateful day, Romy entered her father's private study, a room she had rarely been allowed to explore. The walls were lined with towering bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of old paper and cedar. Her eyes immediately caught a faint glint, a small, leather-bound journal partially concealed behind a row of classic novels. She didn't know why, but her heartbeat quickened. She had no idea that this journal would change everything she thought she knew about her father. As she held it in her hands, the leather was cold and smooth, almost alive, as if it had absorbed the secrets of a lifetime. The lock was simple, but broken. Someone, or perhaps her father himself, had ensured it could be opened only by the right person at the right time. Romy hesitated. Should she even look inside? Could she bear the truth, whatever it was? But curiosity, that insatiable and dangerous force, overtook her fear. She flipped the first page. The handwriting was meticulous yet tense, as though each word was clawed out under pressure. The opening lines sent a shiver down her spine. He's slipping away. I can't tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. I must protect them. Romy froze. Who was he? And what did her father mean by slipping away? Her mind raced, piecing together every late-night conversation she had dismissed as ordinary family frustration. Had she missed the warning signs? As she read further, the entries became darker. Her father wrote about fear, an unrelenting, almost paralyzing fear that seemed to consume him in private moments. He mentioned tensions within the family, naming names, recounting arguments, betrayals, and suspicions that Romy had only sensed vaguely but never confronted. Each page was a window into a mind that was brilliant but haunted, loving but tormented. By the time she reached the middle of the journal, Romy was trembling. She came across a passage that chilled her to the bone. They don't know what I've seen. If the truth came out, it could destroy everything. I'm forced to hide it for now. Forced to hide it. The words echoed in her head. Who had forced him? And from whom was he hiding the truth? Romy felt an icy realization. This journal was not just personal. It was a record of secrets that someone, somewhere, might kill to protect. The next entry was even more cryptic. Nick is close. Too close. I dream of shadows. I dream of him in the room with us. I must prepare, yet I fear I cannot. Romy's hands shook. She thought of her older brother, a man she had always trusted, and the implications were terrifying. Were these fears real or the ramblings of a worried mind? Could Lucien's imagination have taken such dark turns? Or had he truly sensed a danger that no one else could see? She put the journal down for a moment and tried to breathe. The study, which had once felt familiar and safe, now seemed like a cage. Shadows stretched across the walls, cast by the late afternoon sun filtering through the tall windows. Romy's mind was spinning with questions, and every answer seemed to create 10 more. For days, Romy couldn't stop thinking about what she had read. Every night, she would replay the passages in her mind, dissecting them, trying to find clues, signs, anything that could explain her father's fear. The tension in the journal was palpable, almost suffocating, and she began to feel that she, too, was being pulled into a web she couldn't escape. And then came the moment that changed everything. Romy realized she could no longer hide what she had found. At first, She had intended to lock the journal away, pretending it never existed. But the more she read, the more she understood that the world needed to know. There were truths in those pages that went beyond personal family drama. Truths that could illuminate hidden dangers, secrets, and betrayals that could impact everyone who thought they knew the Calderons. But revealing the journal was not simple. Each time she considered it, fear gripped her. She imagined the consequences, the backlash, the disbelief, the anger, and perhaps even danger to herself. And yet, Romy knew she could not stay silent. The decision had been forced upon her by circumstances she could no longer ignore. What Romy discovered in those pages wasn't just the private thoughts of a troubled filmmaker. It was the map of a family's unraveling, a roadmap of suspense and terror that no one outside their walls could have anticipated. Every name, every cryptic phrase, every fearful note was a clue to a mystery that seemed far larger and darker than anyone could have guessed. Imagine for a moment. You discover that someone you love, someone you trusted completely, has been carrying a secret so dangerous that it could shatter everything around them. How would you react? Could you handle the weight of knowing what they feared most? That is the dilemma Romy faced. And as she began to understand the full scope of the journal, she realized that it contained a revelation that could change her life forever. Yet, even as she prepared to confront the truth and reveal it to the world, Romy could not shake a lingering question. What had happened to make her father write these words in the first place? Was it paranoia, insight, or something far more sinister? And more importantly, what would happen once the world saw the journal's contents? The answers, Romy knew, were just beginning to unfold. Each page she turned pulled her deeper into a story she had never asked to be part of, a story of love, fear, betrayal, and secrets that demanded to be seen. And she realized something terrifying. The moment she revealed the journal, nothing would ever be the same again. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Romy Calderon had always sensed that the Calderon estate held more secrets than anyone dared speak about. The sprawling mansion perched atop Crescent Hills was more than a home. It was a fortress. Its tall, ivy-clad walls, towering gates, and labyrinthine corridors were built not just for comfort, but for secrecy. But even Romy had never imagined that one room could hold the key to a mystery that would shake her to her core. It began that Saturday afternoon when she wandered into her father's private study. She had walked past it countless times before, a space cordoned off by a brass doorknob and a polite "do not enter" sign that her father had jokingly threatened to enforce with lasers and alarms. But that day, something compelled her inside. Perhaps it was the way the sunlight hit the shelves, creating shadows that seemed to point directly to the small leather-bound journal tucked behind a row of classic novels. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. The leather was soft, worn smooth from years of handling, yet the edges were sharp and rigid, as if the book had been carefully hidden to protect its contents. She felt a strange weight in her hands, not just the physical heft of the journal, but the invisible weight of the secrets it contained. She had no idea that opening it would plunge her into a labyrinth of fear, suspense, and revelation. As she flipped open the first page, her eyes scanned the neat, precise handwriting. Her father, Lucien Calderon, had always been meticulous. Every script, every note, every storyboard a reflection of his obsession with detail. But the words on the page were different. They were urgent, tense, and almost panicked. "He's slipping away. I can't tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. I must protect them." Romy froze. The words felt like a slap in the face. Who was he talking about? Why would he feel the need to protect someone? And most importantly, what danger was he sensing that no one else could see? The more she read, the more the journal drew her in. There were entries about family arguments that Romy had only vaguely remembered, disputes that had seemed ordinary at the time, but now hinted at something far more sinister. Her father wrote about conversations that had ended abruptly, accusations that were never explained, and feelings of fear that seemed to consume him in private moments. One passage stood out, chilling her blood. "Nick is too close. I dream of shadows. I dream of him in the room with us. I must prepare, yet I fear I cannot." Romy's stomach turned. She thought of her older brother, Nick, and a sense of unease crept over her. Had her father's fears been grounded in reality? Or were they the product of a brilliant mind spiraling into paranoia? She didn't know, but the tension in the journal was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. For the next several hours, Romy pored over every page, trying to connect dots that seemed intentionally scattered. There were references to people she had never heard of friends, distant relatives, even strangers, each mentioned in cryptic phrases like, "They watch too closely," or, "I cannot trust what I see." Each entry was a puzzle, and the more she read, the more the pieces resisted fitting together. By evening, Romy's hands were sore, her eyes burning from hours of concentration. She closed the journal and leaned back in the worn leather chair, trying to process what she had discovered. The room, which had once felt safe and familiar, now seemed oppressive, as though the walls themselves were whispering warnings. She realized that this journal was not merely a record of private thoughts. It was a map of danger, a blueprint of secrets that someone had desperately tried to protect. The realization was terrifying. She had to ask herself, why had her father hidden this? Who had he feared? And what would happen if the truth were revealed? Romy felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She could not, and would not, ignore what she had found. As the night deepened, she began to notice details she had never paid attention to before. The study's bookshelves were filled not just with novels and scripts, but with letters, photographs, and mementos carefully arranged. Many of these items seemed innocuous, family photos, old film reels. But some caught her eye, hinting at hidden layers. There were envelopes with no addresses, photographs with faces obscured, and notes with cryptic messages scribbled in the margins. It was as though the room itself was a diary, each object a fragment of a larger story. One photograph, in particular, sent a shiver down her spine. It was a family portrait, but something was off. Her father's expression was strained, almost fearful. Her mother's smile seemed forced, her eyes distant. And Nick, her brother, stood slightly apart, a shadow of intensity in his gaze that Romy had never noticed before. The photograph captured a moment in time that now felt loaded with significance, a silent warning embedded in plain sight. Romy realized that she was not just uncovering her father's secrets. She was uncovering her family's hidden history, a narrative of tension, fear, and unspoken conflicts. Each page of the journal, each photograph, each note in the study contributed to a story that had been carefully concealed for decades. And now, she was the only one who had the key to unlock it. But with understanding came a new layer of dread. The journal was not merely a chronicle, it was a warning. Lucien Calderon's words suggested that the threats he perceived were real, imminent, and potentially dangerous. Romy felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Should she confront her family? Should she seek help? Or should she keep the journal hidden, as her father had sometimes urged, until the right time? Her thoughts were interrupted by a noise, a soft, almost imperceptible creak from the hallway outside the study. Romy froze. She wasn't supposed to be alone. Someone else could be in the house. Was it her mother, checking in? Or someone else entirely? The thought sent a jolt of fear through her. She glanced at the journal, then at the door, and realized that whatever secrets were contained within, they were far from safe. That night, as she locked herself in her room, Romy began to write down her observations, her questions, and her fears. She realized that she needed to organize what she had discovered, to create a framework for understanding the journal's contents. But even as she wrote, she felt the invisible pressure of something unseen, a presence that seemed to hover at the edges of her perception. It was as though the journal had awakened forces she had never anticipated, forces that would challenge not only her understanding of her father, but also the very foundation of her family's story. By the end of Chapter 1, Romy understood one undeniable truth. The discovery of the journal was only the beginning. Every entry, every photograph, every cryptic note pointed to a story far larger than she could have imagined, a story filled with fear, betrayal, and secrets that demanded to be revealed. But even as she resolved to uncover the full truth, she knew that the path ahead would be perilous. And more importantly, she realized that someone, or something, might be watching her, waiting for the moment she made the first move. The chapter closes with a question that would haunt her every waking moment. Could she uncover the secrets of the Calderon family without putting herself in unimaginable danger? And if she failed, what would be lost forever? But what Romy would find next, hidden in the shadows of her father's study, was something no one could have predicted, and it would change everything. Romy Calderon couldn't sleep that night. Her mind kept replaying the entries she had read in her father's journal, the cryptic warnings that made her stomach churn with unease. Every creak in the old estate seemed louder, every shadow darker. Had she imagined the noise outside the study, or was someone really there? The idea that she might not be alone sent chills down her spine. She got up from her bed and walked quietly to the window overlooking the mansion's gardens. The moon cast an eerie glow, illuminating the perfectly trimmed hedges and the winding stone paths. The estate, which had always symbolized safety and luxury, now looked like a labyrinth of secrets. She realized, with a sense of horror, that the house itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover what had been hidden for so long. Her mind returned to the journal. The entries she had read suggested that the fear her father experienced was not just paranoia. He had written repeatedly about a looming threat, someone close to the family, someone he trusted. Each phrase, "I must prepare, yet I fear I cannot," echoed in her ears. Who could he have feared so deeply that he felt the need to document it in such detail? And why hadn't anyone else noticed the tension he had lived with for years? The next morning, Romy decided to explore the study more thoroughly. She needed to understand the context of the journal, to see what else her father had hidden behind the walls lined with books and family memorabilia. Her heart pounded as she opened drawers, examined shelves, and inspected the corners of the room she had overlooked. That's when she noticed it, a faint outline on the floor, beneath an old rug near the far wall. At first, she thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, but as she knelt down and moved the rug aside, she discovered a small trapdoor, cleverly concealed. It had been so well hidden that it would have gone unnoticed by anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Romy's hands shook as she tried to lift the trapdoor. It resisted at first, then gave way with a soft creak, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Her heart raced. What could her father have hidden beneath the study? A secret room? A safe? Or something far more dangerous? With a deep breath, she grabbed a flashlight from a nearby drawer and began to descend. The air grew cooler and damp, the scent of old stone and dust filling her nostrils. The staircase opened into a small underground chamber, no larger than a walk-in closet. The walls were lined with shelves, each stacked with boxes, folders, and envelopes. Everything seemed meticulously organized, labeled with dates and cryptic codes. Romy's hands trembled as she opened the first box. Inside were documents, financial records, letters, and photographs, many of which contradicted the family narrative she had always believed. There were letters from people she had never met, accusing her father of secrets she had never imagined. Some photos depicted gatherings that seemed ordinary at first glance, but, upon closer inspection, included people whose presence raised questions. Why were they there? What role had they played in her father's hidden life? She reached for another envelope, labeled only with a date and a single word. Nick. Her hands paused. Could this be related to her brother? She opened it carefully and found a series of notes her father had written, documenting arguments, concerns, and suspicions. Some entries were mundane, disagreements over family finances or trivial misunderstandings, but others were alarming. He watches too closely. I fear what he might do if he discovers the truth. Romy's blood ran cold. Her brother had always been intense, passionate, sometimes reckless, but had he really posed a danger? Or was her father's fear a reflection of some secret knowledge Romy had yet to uncover? The next folder contained even more startling revelations. There were photographs of people meeting in secret, documents indicating transfers of money with no explanation, and letters hinting at threats and coercion. Romy realized that her father had been documenting not just personal fears, but a network of hidden connections, relationships, and potential dangers. Every page she turned, every photograph she examined, added a new layer to the story she thought she knew. As the hours passed, Romy became aware of a presence in the chamber, not a person, but a feeling. It was as if the room itself was alive, resonating with the anxiety, fear, and secrets her father had poured into it. She felt a growing sense of urgency, a need to understand the full scope of what had been hidden here before it was too late. She began to organize the documents, trying to make sense of the chronology and the patterns her father had painstakingly recorded. Names recurred, phrases repeated, and certain events seemed to escalate in danger and intensity over time. Romy realized that the journal had been just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the study lay a carefully curated record of threats, suspicions, and warnings that her father had feared would one day come to light. But as she delved deeper, she discovered something that made her pause: a photograph of her father, Lucien, standing in the study itself, holding the very journal she had found. His expression was one of dread, eyes wide, lips pressed tightly together. It was as if he had known, or at least feared, that someone would eventually uncover his secrets. And in the background of the photograph, a shadow loomed, a figure partially obscured, watching, waiting. Romy's breath caught. Could the photograph be a warning? Was the figure in the background someone she should recognize? Or was it a symbol of the unseen forces her father had felt but could never fully confront? The questions multiplied, each more unsettling than the last. By the time she emerged from the underground chamber, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the estate. Romy felt changed, as if she had crossed a threshold into a world she could never leave. The secrets of the Calderon family, carefully documented and hidden for decades, were now in her hands. And she knew, with a mixture of fear and determination, that revealing them would have consequences. Consequences she could not yet fully understand. As she locked the trapdoor behind her, she made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. But she also realized that every step forward brought new dangers. The shadows her father had written about were real, and some of them were closer than she had ever imagined. And then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps from the main house, slow and deliberate. Romy froze, heart pounding. Someone was coming, someone who might know she had discovered the hidden chamber. Her instincts screamed at her to hide, but she had nowhere to go. The chapter ends with Romy pressed against the wall, listening as the footsteps drew nearer, every second stretching into an eternity. She knew that whatever, or whoever, was approaching could change everything she had uncovered. And in that moment, the true danger her father had feared was no longer just words in a journal. It was real, immediate, and closing in. But what awaited her in the next room would reveal a secret more shocking than anything the journal had suggested. And it would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about her family. The footsteps stopped. Romy pressed herself against the wall of the study, heart hammering so loudly she feared the person outside would hear it. She strained her ears, listening to the quiet hum of the estate at night, creaking floorboards, distant wind rattling the windows, the faint trickle of water from the fountain in the garden. But there was no sound of retreat. Whoever had approached had paused. She slowly peeked around the corner and saw only darkness. For a moment, relief surged through her, but it was short-lived. In the faint moonlight filtering through the window, she noticed a shadow at the edge of the room, a subtle movement she hadn't seen before. Someone, or something, had been there while she was in the chamber. Romy's pulse quickened. She had expected fear, but now there was something sharper: resolve. Her father had documented his fears meticulously. He had left behind clues for her, perhaps intentionally, so that she could uncover the truth. And now, the first tangible clue was staring her in the face. Her eyes scanned the study. Among the photographs, the boxes, and the letters, one item stood out: a small, unassuming envelope tucked into a drawer labeled "For Romy, only when the time comes." Her hands trembled as she pulled it out. The envelope was old, the paper soft but fragile. There was no return address, no sender, only her name written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. She hesitated. Should she open it? Could she trust it? The weight of the moment was almost unbearable. Then, with a deep breath, she carefully slit the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly, with a short message written in the same tense, urgent style as the journal. Romy, if you are reading this, it means you have found the journal and the chamber. You are closer to the truth than you realize. The danger is real. The key lies in understanding what has been hidden, not just what is in front of you, but what has been kept in shadows. Look for the photograph with the figure behind us. It is the first tangible clue. Follow it carefully, and trust no one outside these walls. Lucien. Romy's hands shook. This was her first confirmation that her father's fears had a foundation in reality. This was more than a diary of paranoia. This was a map leading her to a truth someone had desperately tried to conceal. She ran to the photograph her father had highlighted in the note, the one showing him in the study holding the journal, with a shadowy figure looming behind him. She examined it closely, turning it this way and that, searching for a detail she had missed. The figure's face was partially obscured, but something about their posture, the way they leaned slightly forward, felt deliberate. The figure was aware of being photographed, aware of its presence in the study, and aware that it could be discovered. Romy compared the figure to the family members she knew. The shape was vaguely familiar, but distorted by shadows. Was it someone from outside the family? Or someone she had known all along, hiding in plain sight? The question gnawed at her relentlessly. She began cross-referencing the other photographs she had discovered in the hidden chamber. There were images of family events, gatherings, and parties. In several of them, the same shadowy figure appeared in the background, partially obscured, always lurking, never interacting directly. Romy realized that her father had been documenting the figure for years, subtly warning her without ever revealing the full identity. Hours passed as she meticulously compared faces, gestures, and shadows. The process was exhausting, but Romy felt a thrill she had never experienced before. A combination of fear, curiosity, and empowerment. She was beginning to understand the depth of her father's preparation, the care with which he had left breadcrumbs for her to follow. Then came the breakthrough. One of the photographs, taken during a family dinner years ago, revealed a small, almost imperceptible detail, a ring on the figure's hand, a distinctive design she had seen before. Her mind raced. That ring belonged to a trusted family friend, someone her father had mentioned frequently in casual conversations, someone no one would suspect. Romy's pulse quickened. This was it, the first tangible clue her father had left for her. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the implications were staggering. Someone close to the family had been observing, lurking, and possibly manipulating events from behind the scenes. And now, with this clue in hand, Romy had the first concrete lead on the mystery her father had tried to document for years. But uncovering the clue also raised new questions. Why had her father been so fearful of this individual? What had this person done, or been capable of doing, that warranted such vigilance? And most importantly, what danger did Romy herself face now that she had uncovered the first piece of the puzzle? The hours turned into days as she followed the trail laid out by her father's journal and the photographs. Each discovery led to another question. Each revelation pulled her deeper into a web of secrets she had never imagined. Letters hidden in envelopes, subtle marks in photographs, notes in margins. All of it pointed to a truth that was more complex and more terrifying than Romy could have anticipated. One evening, as she sat in the study reviewing the photographs and letters, she noticed a pattern in the entries that had previously escaped her. Certain dates were circled, events were referenced multiple times, and phrases repeated themselves across years. It became clear that her father had been tracking not just the shadowy figure, but a series of events, interactions, and threats that built up over time. He had anticipated a moment when the truth would need to be revealed, and he had prepared her for it. Romy leaned back in her chair, exhaustion mixing with adrenaline. She realized that she was no longer just uncovering her father's secrets. She was stepping into his world, a world of hidden dangers, cryptic messages, and careful surveillance. And the first tangible clue, the figure in the photograph, was only the beginning. Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound from the hallway, a soft shuffle, almost imperceptible. Romy froze. Could it be the same presence she had felt before? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone who had been monitoring her progress? Her heart raced, but this time she felt a spark of determination. She could not be intimidated. Her father had prepared her for this moment, and she was ready to follow the clues wherever they led. As she reached for the journal to cross-reference the entry that mentioned the figure, she noticed another subtle detail in the photograph. Something she had overlooked in her first examination. A small symbol etched into the corner of the frame, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. It was a mark she recognized from one of the envelopes in the hidden chamber, a signature of her father's meticulous planning. The discovery sent a thrill through her. Her father had left a trail, a code, a roadmap to uncover the truth. And now, Romy understood that the shadowy figure in the photograph was not just a threat. It was the key to unraveling the larger mystery that had haunted her family for years. But even as she pieced together the first tangible clue, Romy knew that danger was closing in. The person, or people, who had been lurking in the shadows were aware that she was following the trail. Every step she took, every discovery she made, brought her closer to the truth, but also closer to the unknown threat her father had feared. And just as she began to feel a sense of cautious progress, a sudden sound from the study door made her freeze. A deliberate knock, slow and measured, as if someone was announcing themselves. Romy's breath caught in her throat. Someone was outside, waiting. And in that instant, she realized that the first clue had led her into a larger, far more dangerous game than she had anticipated. But what she would find when she finally confronted the person behind the shadowy figure would be more shocking than anything the journal had revealed, and it would force her to question everything she thought she knew about her father, her family, and the secrets they had been hiding. Romy Calderon sat frozen, the soft knock still echoing in her ears. Her pulse thundered in her chest, and every instinct screamed at her to flee. But she knew that running would mean abandoning the first tangible clue her father had so carefully left for her. Whoever was outside the study might be a threat, or they might hold answers she desperately needed. She had to confront the unknown. With measured steps, she approached the door. Each creak of the floorboard beneath her feet felt amplified in the silence. Her hand shook as she reached for the knob, pausing to take a deep breath. She pushed the door open slowly. Standing in the doorway was a man in his late 40s, tall and lean, his features partially obscured by shadows. There was something immediately familiar about him, a presence she couldn't quite place, yet one that seemed woven into the fabric of her memories. Her father had warned her to trust no one, yet the first tangible clue seemed to point directly to this man. He smiled, faint and knowing, as if he had been expecting her. "Romy," he said softly, "I see you've found what your father left behind." Romy's throat went dry. Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. He stepped closer into the light. "My name is Elias Vanden. I was a friend of your father's. More than that, I was someone who knew the truth about the dangers he faced, and someone he trusted to guide you when the time came." Romy's mind raced. She had never heard of Elias Vanden. How could he be a friend of her father's, and why had she never met him before? And yet, something in his voice, his presence, suggested he was telling the truth. She remembered the journal, the warnings about hidden threats, the shadowy figure in the photograph. Could Elias be the figure her father had documented for years? Or was he here to help her uncover it? Elias's eyes flicked to the photograph she held in her hands. "That photo, it was more than just an image," he said. "Your father was warning you. That figure you saw, someone he feared deeply, was closer than anyone realized. And now, Romy, you are stepping into a story that has been years in the making." Romy swallowed hard. "What story?" Elias's expression grew serious. "The Calderon family has always been complicated. There are layers of trust, loyalty, and secrets that most people cannot comprehend. Your father documented his fears because he knew that, one day, someone would have to understand them and act." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Romy could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. Every instinct, she had screamed that the next revelations would be life-changing. "You've discovered the first clue," Elias continued. "But it's not the end. It's a doorway. Behind that clue lies a series of truths your father believed were too dangerous to reveal all at once. And now, you must follow the path he laid out carefully. One wrong move, and the consequences could be catastrophic." Romy felt both fear and exhilaration. This was exactly what her father had prepared her for, a careful, deliberate journey into the hidden realities of their family's history. But even as she felt a spark of confidence, a new question burned in her mind. Who was the shadowy figure in the photograph? And was Elias part of the threat, or the solution? Elias seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know it's hard to trust anyone right now," he said softly. "But your father chose me for a reason. I can help you navigate what's coming. Romy nodded slowly. Then, where do we start? He gestured to the photograph. We start here. The figure behind your father was someone who moved in the shadows for years, observing, manipulating, and testing the limits of loyalty. Your father documented it all, hoping someone would see the pattern. And now you have. But the pattern is only the beginning. Romy's mind raced. What pattern? What am I supposed to see? Elias reached out and took the photograph from her hands. He studied it carefully, eyes narrowing as he traced the lines, the shadows, the subtle details. Look closely at the posture, the angles, the light. Everything your father documented had meaning. The figure isn't just lurking, it's signaling. It's leaving a trail. He paused, and Romy realized he was speaking as if the journal and photographs were a puzzle only she could solve. Your father trusted you to decode it, Elias said. And now it's your turn. Over the next few hours, Elias guided Romy through the photograph, pointing out subtle details she had overlooked, a slight twist of the hand, a shadow that aligned with a bookshelf, a reflection in a window that hinted at a second presence. Each observation felt like a revelation, as if her father had left her a series of breadcrumbs leading to a truth so dangerous that it could have destroyed them all if discovered prematurely. Then came the moment that changed everything. Elias reached for a nearby drawer and pulled out a small, black leather-bound notebook, smaller than the journal Romy had found. He handed it to her carefully. This is the second layer, he said. Your father recorded things here he never put in the journal. Names, dates, locations, clues that point directly to the shadowy figure. But you must be careful. Whoever the figure is, they know how to cover their tracks. Romy opened the notebook and began to read. The handwriting was her father's, precise, controlled, yet tense. There were lists of names, places, events, and cryptic phrases like, meeting at Crescent Park. Watch for signals. He trusts no one. Phone call intercepted. Pattern of movement confirmed. Danger increases. Only Romy can see the connection. Must guide her carefully. Her hands trembled as she turned each page. The clues were scattered but unmistakable. Someone had been manipulating events for years, always in the shadows, always unseen. And now, Romy was beginning to see the pattern, just as her father had intended. Elias watched her closely. The figure you see in the photograph isn't just a threat, he said. They are testing boundaries, observing weaknesses, and ensuring that the family remains under their control. Your father documented it all because he believed only someone he trusted could stop them. Romy swallowed hard. And now it's me? He nodded. Yes, but you won't be alone. I'm here to guide you. But trust yourself. Your father believed in you more than anyone, and he left you the tools to uncover the truth. The key is to follow the clues, connect the dots, and understand the motivations. Only then will the shadowy figure be revealed. The night stretched on as Romy and Elias pored over the photograph and the notebook. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. Patterns emerged, connections became clear, and a sense of urgency grew. Romy realized that she had stepped into a web of secrets far more intricate and dangerous than she had imagined. And just when she thought she understood the scope of what her father had documented, a sudden realization hit her. The shadowy figure wasn't just observing. They were actively manipulating events in real time. Someone had been watching her every move since she discovered the hidden chamber. Every clue, every lead she uncovered, was being monitored and perhaps even influenced. Romy's breath caught. The danger her father had feared was no longer confined to the past. It was here, now, closing in around her. She looked at Elias, her eyes wide. Then what do we do next? Elias's expression grew grim. We follow the trail. Every clue leads to the next. But remember this, the closer you get to the truth, the greater the risk. And when you finally confront the figure, you will see that nothing is as it seems. The truth is far more shocking than the shadows your father documented. Romy nodded, determination surging through her veins. She was ready to follow the path her father had laid out, ready to confront the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But deep down, she knew one terrifying fact. The moment of revelation was approaching, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would prepare her for what she would discover. And in that instant, Romy realized that the first encounter with the shadowy figure would not just test her courage. It would change everything about the Calderon family, the secrets they had hidden, and the legacy her father had left behind. But the revelation that awaited her in the next step of the investigation would be more shocking than anything she had imagined, and it would force her to question everything she believed about trust, loyalty, and betrayal. Romy Calderon felt the weight of the journal, the notebook, and the photograph pressing down on her. Each item was a piece of a puzzle that her father had left behind, carefully constructed over years. But now, with Elias by her side, the task felt monumental. How could she decode the shadowy figure's movements without being caught in their web? And more importantly, how could she anticipate the betrayals that were waiting just around the corner? She traced her finger along a series of entries in the journal and corresponding photographs. At first, they seemed unrelated: a minor argument during a family dinner, a forgotten meeting at a gallery, a sudden change in her father's demeanor during a holiday gathering. But as she overlaid the timeline from the notebook, a horrifying pattern emerged. Each event had been manipulated, orchestrated, or influenced by someone inside the family, someone she had trusted implicitly. Elias leaned over her shoulder, following her finger as it traced the connections. "See this?" he whispered. "Every argument, every unexplained absence, every subtle tension, it all leads back to a single source. Someone has been pulling strings for years, testing boundaries, observing reactions, and shaping the family's life from the shadows." Romy swallowed hard, dread pooling in her stomach. "Who? Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias paused, then met her gaze. "It's someone you know, someone your father knew well. And the first betrayal, it's closer than you think." Her hands shook as she flipped through the photographs again. Then she saw it, a small detail she had overlooked before. A glance in a mirror, a subtle posture, a hand resting too lightly on a shoulder, all pointing to a single person. Nick, her older brother, the one she had trusted all her life. The realization hit her like a wave. Her own brother. The person she had believed to be her protector had been part of the manipulations her father had feared. The clues were subtle, hidden in plain sight, but undeniable once the patterns were clear. Nick had been influencing events, testing reactions, and keeping secrets that no one else had noticed. Romy's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to confront him immediately, but she knew the danger. The shadowy figure was clever, patient, and always observing. One wrong move could tip him off. She had to act carefully, strategically, just as her father had planned. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know this is difficult, Romy, but understanding the betrayal is the first step. Your father documented everything for a reason. You have to see the full scope before confronting anyone." Romy nodded, fighting tears. She turned back to the documents, tracing the timeline of events. Every subtle manipulation, every carefully placed note, every orchestrated interaction now pointed to her brother's involvement. It wasn't malicious in the way one might expect from a villain. It was calculated, controlled, almost experimental. Her father had feared Nick might pose a danger, but seeing it laid out so clearly made the fear tangible. The next clue was in one of the letters tucked in the hidden chamber. It was written in a hand that mimicked Nick's style. Familiar, casual, deceptively innocent, but the content was revealing. "Everything is proceeding as expected. They don't suspect a thing. She is ready to follow the trail. I'll continue observing until the truth becomes clear." Romy's hands trembled as she read the lines aloud. "Hey, he's been watching me," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Yes, he's always been observing, testing. The shadowy figure wasn't just a threat to your father, it was Nick. And now, he knows someone is onto him." The weight of the revelation was almost unbearable. Romy had spent years trusting her brother, sharing moments of joy and hardship, believing in their bond. And yet, here was evidence that he had been orchestrating events, manipulating circumstances, and keeping secrets that endangered the entire family. The betrayal was personal, intimate, and shattering. Romy sank into a chair, trying to process the enormity of what she had discovered. Every memory, every interaction, now carried a new meaning. Was he always like this? Or had something happened to change him? And why had her father felt so compelled to document it all rather than confront him directly? Elias handed her the second notebook, the one her father had kept separate from the journal. "Your father anticipated this moment," he said. "He knew you'd discover the betrayal. That's why he left the notes, the photographs, and the clues." He wanted you to understand it fully, so you could act wisely. Romy opened the notebook, scanning the entries. There were detailed observations of Nick's behavior, patterns of testing loyalty, subtle provocations, and manipulations of events to gauge reactions. Each entry was written with a careful mix of concern and caution, showing her father's deep understanding of his son's tendencies and the potential danger they posed. This is all him, Romy whispered, her voice breaking. Everything he feared, it's true. Elias nodded solemnly. Yes, and now it's your turn to decide how to proceed. You have the advantage, knowledge. But knowledge alone isn't enough. You need strategy, patience, and caution. The first betrayal has been revealed, but it's only the beginning. There are deeper layers, more secrets, and more danger waiting as you move forward. Romy felt a surge of determination. She had spent so long uncovering the clues her father left behind that she almost forgot the stakes. Now, the betrayal was personal, and the need for action was urgent. She realized that confronting the shadowy figure, Nick, would not only test her courage but also the careful planning her father had left as a roadmap. But even as she formulated a plan, a creeping doubt gnawed at her. If Nick had been manipulating events for years, how many other layers of deception remained hidden? How many people had been involved in the manipulations, knowingly or unknowingly? And could she trust Elias completely, or was he another piece in the complex puzzle her father had documented? Romy pushed the doubts aside, focusing on the evidence in front of her. The betrayal was clear. The shadowy figure, the orchestrator of subtle manipulations and hidden tests, was someone she had loved and trusted, her own brother. And now, with the first tangible betrayal uncovered, she understood that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, difficult choices, and moral dilemmas she had never anticipated. As the night deepened, Romy and Elias mapped out the patterns, charting the timeline of Nick's manipulations. They traced subtle provocations, orchestrated events, and secret observations, creating a detailed roadmap of the betrayal. Each revelation strengthened Romy's resolve, but also heightened the tension. She knew that Nick, if he realized she had uncovered the truth, would not hesitate to protect his secrets. The chapter closes with Romy staring at the photographs and notebooks, heart-pounding. She understood the betrayal fully now, but the consequences of confronting it loomed large. Every instinct screamed caution, yet a fire of determination burned within her. The first betrayal had been revealed. But the next steps would force her into a confrontation she could not avoid, a confrontation that would redefine everything she thought she knew about loyalty, family, and trust. And in the next chapter, Romy would uncover a revelation so shocking that it would change the trajectory of the entire investigation and force her to face the shadowy figure in ways she never imagined. Romy Calderon sat in the quiet of the study, the weight of the first betrayal pressing on her like a physical force. Nick, her brother, the one she had loved, trusted, and confided in, was the shadowy figure her father had feared. The revelation felt like a punch to the chest, leaving her breathless and disoriented. Yet amidst the shock, a clarity emerged. She could not ignore the truth. She had to prepare for the confrontation that was inevitable. Elias watched her closely, his expression a mixture of concern and reassurance. "You've uncovered the first layer of deception," he said. "Now you need to anticipate the moves that will follow." Nick isn't just a manipulator, he's strategic. He has patterns, habits, and instincts your father documented carefully. Understanding them is the key to facing him. Romy nodded, though her hands shook. Her mind replayed every family gathering, every subtle tension, every hidden message in the photographs. How had she missed it all? But hindsight offered little comfort. What mattered now was preparation. She needed a plan, a strategy, and the courage to act. Elias pulled out a large map of the estate, alongside a timeline of events from the journal and the hidden chamber. "We start here," he said, pointing to the guest house where Nick had lived. "This is where many of the manipulations originated. Patterns show meetings, surveillance, and subtle interventions. If we anticipate his movements, we can position ourselves to uncover the full scope of his actions without alerting him." Romy leaned over the table, her eyes scanning the notes, photographs, and diagrams. The patterns were complex, layered, and methodical. Each subtle gesture, Each orchestrated argument, each seemingly minor family incident fit into a larger puzzle. Nick had been playing a long game, testing loyalty, observing reactions, and shaping circumstances. And now, Romy had to navigate that game carefully. The first step, Elias explained, was reconnaissance. "We need to understand the current situation fully," he said. "Nick is aware someone is observing. He'll be cautious, subtle, and strategic. We can't afford mistakes. We start by retracing the documented events, cross-referencing with what we know about his behavior, and predicting his next move." Romy took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The idea of watching her brother, analyzing his every action, felt surreal. She had known him all her life, but now she had to view him through a lens of suspicion, strategy, and caution. Every gesture could be significant, every word a potential clue. As they began their reconnaissance, Romy realized the depth of her father's foresight. The journal, the hidden chamber, the photographs, all were designed to guide her through this exact moment. Her father had anticipated the first betrayal and prepared her to navigate it with precision. It was both comforting and terrifying. Hours turned into days as Romy and Elias meticulously analyzed the patterns. They reviewed photographs of past gatherings, letters, notes, and journal entries. Each clue, each detail, was a thread in a web of manipulation that Nick had spun over years. They documented patterns of interaction, subtle provocations, and orchestrated events. Each revelation brought clarity, but also heightened the tension. Then came the first breakthrough. Romy noticed a subtle, recurring pattern in the photographs and letters, an unassuming gesture, a repeated phrase, a shadow in the background. It pointed to a location on the estate that had previously gone unnoticed, a small, secluded study in the corner of the main house. According to the documentation, this was where Nick conducted many of his private observations and subtle manipulations. "This is it," Romy whispered. "This is where he's been orchestrating things." Elias nodded. "Exactly. And this is where you'll need to focus. But remember, this is just the beginning. The shadowy figure is clever, aware, and patient. You can't confront him blindly. You need to anticipate, plan, and execute carefully." Romy felt a surge of determination. She had uncovered the first betrayal, traced the patterns, and now knew the location where much of the manipulation had taken place. The next step was confrontation, but it had to be precise, calculated, and strategic. One misstep could alert Nick, putting her and Elias in danger. Over the next several days, they prepared meticulously. They reviewed every photograph, every note, every entry in the journal and the hidden chamber. They mapped patterns of movement, anticipated reactions, and rehearsed scenarios. Romy trained herself to recognize subtle gestures, tones of voice, and micro-expressions, clues that could reveal intent and deception. As the preparations continued, Romy also grappled with the emotional weight of the betrayal. Nick had been a brother, a confidant, and now a manipulator whose actions had threatened the family. The emotional stakes were high, and Romy realized that the confrontation would not just test her strategy, but her ability to navigate intense personal emotions under pressure. Elias reminded her, "Focus on the facts. The emotional response is natural, but it can cloud judgment. Your father documented everything with precision. Use that knowledge. Anticipate his moves, recognize the patterns, and you'll gain the upper hand." Despite the gravity of the situation, Romy found moments of clarity and empowerment. She realized that her father's foresight had given her tools, knowledge, and guidance that few could possess. She was not walking blindly into danger. She was stepping into a carefully prepared path, with breadcrumbs left specifically for her. Finally, the night before the planned confrontation arrived, Romy stood in the study, reviewing the final details of the plan with Elias. The estate was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Every photograph, every note, every pattern of movement had been analyzed. Every possible reaction had been considered. And yet, the uncertainty remained. Nick was unpredictable, and the shadowy figure's cunning was formidable. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are ready," he said. "Your father believed in you. You have the knowledge, the strategy, and the clarity to confront this. Trust yourself. And remember, the first confrontation is just the beginning. The truth is layered, and the revelations will continue to unfold. Romy nodded, her resolve hardening. She knew that the next day, when she finally faced Nick, everything would change. The confrontation would test her courage, her intellect, and her understanding of family, loyalty, and betrayal. But she was ready. As she stood in the quiet study, Romy felt a mixture of fear, anticipation, and determination. The first betrayal had been uncovered, the patterns decoded, and the plan set. The shadowy figure, her brother, was close, aware, and strategic. And tomorrow, everything would come to a head. But little did she know, the confrontation would reveal deeper secrets, unexpected alliances, and twists that her father had meticulously documented, but she had not yet fully understood. The first step into the shadowy world her father had left behind was only the beginning, and the revelations waiting in the next chapter would change everything. She traced her finger along a series of entries in the journal and corresponding photographs. At first, they seemed unrelated: a minor argument during a family dinner, a forgotten meeting at a gallery, a sudden change in her father's demeanor during a holiday gathering. But as she overlaid the timeline from the notebook, a horrifying pattern emerged. Each event had been manipulated, orchestrated, or influenced by someone inside the family, someone she had trusted implicitly. Elias leaned over her shoulder, following her finger as it traced the connections. "See this?" he whispered. "Every argument, every unexplained absence, every subtle tension, it all leads back to a single source. Someone has been pulling strings for years, testing boundaries, observing reactions, and shaping the family's life from the shadows." Romy swallowed hard, dread pooling in her stomach. "Who? Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias paused, then met her gaze. "It's someone you know, someone your father knew well. And the first betrayal, it's closer than you think." Her hands shook as she flipped through the photographs again. Then she saw it. A small detail she had overlooked before. A glance in a mirror, a subtle posture, a hand resting too lightly on a shoulder, all pointing to a single person. Nick, her older brother, the one she had trusted all her life. The realization hit her like a wave. Her own brother, the person she had believed to be her protector, had been part of the manipulations her father had feared. The clues were subtle, hidden in plain sight, but undeniable once the patterns were clear. Nick had been influencing events, testing reactions, and keeping secrets that no one else had noticed. Romy's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to confront him immediately, but she knew the danger. The shadowy figure was clever, patient, and always observing. One wrong move could tip him off. She had to act carefully, strategically, just as her father had planned. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know this is difficult, Romy, but understanding the betrayal is the first step. Your father documented everything for a reason. You have to see the full scope before confronting anyone." Romy nodded, fighting tears. She turned back to the documents, tracing the timeline of events. Every subtle manipulation, every carefully placed note, every orchestrated interaction now pointed to her brother's involvement. It wasn't malicious in the way one might expect from a villain. It was calculated, controlled, almost experimental. Her father had feared Nick might pose a danger, but seeing it laid out so clearly made the fear tangible. The next clue was in one of the letters tucked in the hidden chamber. It was written in a hand that mimicked Nick's style, familiar, casual, deceptively innocent, but the content was revealing. "Everything is proceeding as expected. They don't suspect a thing. She is ready to follow the trail. I'll continue observing until the truth becomes clear." Romy's hands trembled as she read the lines aloud. "Hey, he's been watching me," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Yes, he's always been observing, testing. The shadowy figure wasn't just a threat to your father, it was Nick. And now, he knows someone is onto him." The weight of the revelation was almost unbearable. Romy had spent years trusting her brother, sharing moments of joy and hardship, believing in their bond. And yet, here was evidence that he had been orchestrating events, manipulating circumstances, and keeping secrets that endangered the entire family. The betrayal was personal, intimate, and shattering. Romy sank into a chair, trying to process the enormity of what she had discovered. Every memory, every interaction, now carried a new meaning. Was he always like this? Or had something happened to change him? And why had her father felt so compelled to document it all rather than confront him directly? Elias handed her the second notebook, the one her father had kept separate from the journal. Your father anticipated this moment, he said. He knew you'd discover the betrayal. That's why he left the notes, the photographs, and the clues. He wanted you to understand it fully, so you could act wisely. Romy opened the notebook, scanning the entries. There were detailed observations of Nick's behavior, patterns of testing loyalty, subtle provocations, and manipulations of events to gauge reactions. Each entry was written with a careful mix of concern and caution, showing her father's deep understanding of his son's tendencies and the potential danger they posed. This is all him, Romy whispered, her voice breaking. Everything he feared, it's true. Elias nodded solemnly. Yes, and now it's your turn to decide how to proceed. You have the advantage, knowledge. But knowledge alone isn't enough. You need strategy, patience, and caution. The first betrayal has been revealed, but it's only the beginning. There are deeper layers, more secrets, and more danger waiting as you move forward.